Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure for me to be able to introduce our speaker today. Loretta and I go back a very long time, longer than I would like to admit sometimes. But we met in a very different industry that was not at all related to hospice care. And since then, I've just been amazed at some of the things she's done. John said, well, I'd like you to introduce her. And I said, well, what can I say? Because she has volunteered so many hours. She's gone back for training and schooling in different venues and just done a lot for the industry. One of the things I think that she is probably most proud of is being the founder of the Chrysalis End-of-Life Inspirations. This is really very unique, and this is something she came up with on her own. So I hope she's going to tell you about it today because it's really fascinating. She is currently the president of the Chicago End-of-Life Coalition. She's a member of the Ethics Committee of the Advocate Illinois Masonic Medical Center. Now that's a mouthful. I had to write that one down for sure. I think she's probably very proud, as I am, of her for going back to school, getting her master's degree in gerontology at the age of 60. And that is really an accomplishment. I don't think I could do that. But she's not only a speaker that's nationally recognized, she is a journalist as well. She writes for a lot of the trade publications. And she also contributes regularly to the Chicago Tribune, which is her hometown newspaper. And I guess I would just say that she is the person that inspired me to volunteer for hospice. And she just heard that yesterday. She didn't know that. But I'm sure that she will inspire all of you to continue doing what you're doing. And also the new people that are here, that you will want to volunteer for hospice after you hear some of the things that she has to say and shares them with you. So at this time, I'd like to present our speaker, Miss Loretta Downs.
I'm Italian, I talk with my hands and I cry easily. So thank you for starting. Actually, I don't think I've had a good day if I haven't cried, at least once. Anybody on that? Sure. Anybody Italian here who likes that? This is such a privilege to be here with a whole room full of hospice volunteers because I do know what you do and who you are to some degree. We're all very different and bring our special gifts, but I know the challenges. And I also know that, see, when you tell people that you're a hospice volunteer, what do they say? Oh, I couldn't do that, right? Isn't it like you're climbing a mountain or washing the windows on the Sears Tower, or that it's something? Why do you think they do that? I thought because oh, I couldn't do that. Because people know, A, that you're doing this for nothing, that you're taking time that you could very easily have been putting into a lot of things that are more giddy, let's say, and you're doing it for nothing, and you're standing in the suffering of other people. I mean, that's what the hospice is. And it's the hardest time of life, that end of life. And for many of us, we know that it's something we don't want to recognize. I'm not going to die. Or like Woody Allen said, I know I'm going to die, but I don't want to be there when it happens. It's a great philosophy. Unfortunately, you and I know that doesn't work. You're very much there when it happens. And like Gloria said, this is not anything that was in my plan. I was never going to be doing this. Is not in my plan. And by now, I thought I would have written a book or two or three, and I'd be traveling around the world. Not happening. I am traveling a lot, but not because of that. My life transformed in 1979. I graduated from college. I turned 30. I've been on this low educational program all my life. And I got divorced. It's like, oh, this is amazing. And I got a great job in the merchandise mart in Chicago. I was in the home fashion industry, which is where I met Gloria. A couple years later, she was a buyer, and we worked together. And I came to Ann Arbor a lot. And we had a lot of fun together and traveled, went to different places, and just never thought about death and dying. Except in the middle of the 1980s, the industry we were in, which was populated by a lot of creative people, many of whom were gay men, friends started to get AIDS. And we were surrounded by this tragedy that was just coming rapidly and frequently. And by 1989, I was only 40 years old. I'd been to a dozen funerals and memorial services for close friends and business associates. And it was shocking. I didn't understand it, what was happening. And I had an old family, and my father at that time was in his 80s. And I was suddenly facing death all the time, and I didn't understand it. You know, just kind of, my response was to live harder. And I think a lot of people do that. You know, in fact, I have a godson who likes to skydive, and I was really worried about him for a while because I thought he's not facing something. This guy's jumping out. He did it 5 times. But he was young, and he isn't thinking about the end of life at all. So when I was, all these people that I cared about were dying, and one day I get a call from a doctor in California telling me that my husband, whom years after we got divorced had moved to California, and that he was in the county hospital dying of AIDS. And the news was shocking to me on many levels. We had stayed in touch, but not that closely, so I was A, surprised that he had AIDS, and B, that he was dying. And he was asking for me. And I didn't know what to do. I had to consider taking the time from work, spending the money to go. Did I want to see this man I knew to be 6'2" and 200 pounds, weighing 98 pounds? I didn't know. And while I was making all of this decision, he died. And I felt so terrible. I felt so terrible. I felt guilty. I felt angry with myself. I felt ashamed. I felt so horrible, and I decided right then and there that I was not going to ever, no one I loved would ever die alone. I said, I felt too bad. I could not have let this happen. And I thought, I need to know more about dying. You know, what is this motive? Why am I being pulled? Why are all these people in my life dying? And you know, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. My dad, 1991, my 85-year-old father who survived quadruple bypass 5 years earlier. In fact, my father was a pretty sturdy country guy, and he used to bicycle after. How's the sound on this? Are you getting a little vibration? Are you fine in the back? Is this good? It's okay?
Mine's reaching over here.
Okay, because I'm hearing a little vibration. A little static. See if we can do something about that.
Can you hear me here?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. This is good. So my father had an appointment. He was 8 years old. He had an appointment to get a stress test. He was having breathing problems, and he bicycled to the hospital I was born in, the hospital I'm on the ethics committee right now. He bicycled to the hospital, and when they hooked him up, he was having a heart attack. You know, I think the test was more worrisome to him than the bike ride. So they hospitalized him, and he was in there for a month with complications, quadruple bypass. And he used to tell some of his favorite visitors, he never told me or my mom or my sister, but he would say to people, don't ever get into a place like this. They won't let you die. And he meant it. They wouldn't. They kept tinkering with him. And he got better, and he got out, and he went home. And unexpectedly, sudden, even though we knew this is an 85-year-old man who's had a heart condition for a while, we were pretty surprised when he had to go to the emergency room because he couldn't breathe one day. And then it started. And you know, you're all there. You're on the front lines of this. And the doctor didn't tell us he was dying. The doctors let us believe that he would get better. And so we kept hoping he would get better. It's a natural thing. This is our, you know, my sister and my father, my mother and he had been married 61 years. They just celebrated their anniversary. And he spent a month in bed, and then one morning my mother called. She called 911, and I met them at the hospital. And I will never forget my sister standing outside the door when the doctor came to the emergency room and looked at her and said, well, he's pretty bad. And she said, we don't want any heroic measures. And I didn't know what she meant. I should have known. I didn't know what she meant. No, we don't get practice losing our parents. It happens, and that's, you see this all the time with your family members, how hard it is for them to face the reality that they're dealing with in a hospice situation. That's a very important role you play, being present in that suffering for these people. Even for people who've been sick for years, when they are finally faced with a hospice admission, they're faced with the reality that death is coming, it's a crisis, and no one is ever ready for it. And that's why the presence of the volunteers coming in who have nothing to do. You're not coming in to measure status. You're not coming in to check medication. You're not coming in to bathe them. You're coming in, we're coming in to be present in their suffering, to bring a calmness to the situation of crisis in which people have no knowledge of what to do. And we didn't have that when my father was dying. It was 1991, there were hospices. Nobody told us about it. It wasn't an option that was provided for us. So he was admitted, and I went to work and came back and relieved my mom and my sister that evening after work. And he was in a double room with a curtain and another man, and there was only one chair, and I sat in it and leaned against the window and kind of slept on the windowsill all night. People came in and out. No one asked me if I needed anything. It was as though I were invisible. I just sat there, and they came and tinkered, and my father was reaching for something in the sky. Have any of you seen patients do that? Reaching for something, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought he was having a bad dream, and there was no one to talk to. And then finally he settled down, and I might have gotten a little sleep. And in the morning I left, and when I got to work an hour later, my mother called that Daddy had died. And I felt so horrible. My dad died alone. My dad died, and I had walked out of that room carrying all the things with me I needed to say. You know, Dr. Ira Byock has written a book called 4 Things. Have any of you read it? 4 things we need to say. We all need to say. And I'm going to send John a list of any books I mentioned or resources so that he can email them to you, but you're certainly welcome to take notes. The 4 things. And I love you. Thank you. I'm sorry. And forgive me. We have to say those before we say goodbye. And I walked out of my father's room, and I really needed to say those things. And I didn't. So what did I do? I drank martinis. I think, you know, this is my bereavement program. This feels good. I am not going to feel the pain and the suffering of my grief. I'm just going to pretend I don't have it, and I'm going to make it go away by drinking martinis. Well, I don't know if any of you have taken this regime for anything else. As a bereavement tool, it was useful, not productive though. And actually, after a while, I did also work harder, which was good because I wound up being very successful. But I eventually got into therapy, and I got into recovery, and I started running, and I started to get healthier, and I could face my pain and deal with it. But, you know, then another teacher showed up. 2 of my very best friends became HIV positive. They were like brothers. And I thought, oh, you know, I need to be there for them. I need to know what's going on. I have to figure this out. They are not going to die alone. So I set this goal before myself and found out that they and many of my friends were seeing a couple of doctors who practiced at the hospital my father died at, the hospital I was born at, and the hospital where I'm on the others committee. And I became a volunteer. Now, how many of you were volunteers in other things before you became a hospice volunteer? Yeah. There's something that volunteering comes to many of us early. My first gig was at the Anti-Cruelty Society with the puppies. We did pet therapy visits. That was a real easy one to understand. When I tell people, oh, I take puppies to the pediatrics ward at the hospital, they said, oh, yeah, now hospice volunteers. Oh, I can do that. And baskets at Christmas, I was helping the Friends of the Elderly. So those of us who volunteered, and this probably won't be your last volunteer gig, or you, well, I don't know, 23 years. We have someone from 23 years, maybe. Congratulations. So I started volunteering on the AIDS ward at this hospital, and I walked in the first day, and I was really nervous. There were 19 beds and 3 different corridors on this unit, and I was afraid I'd run into someone I knew, you know, in one of the beds. And it was a hospital. Anybody here like hospitals? Okay, great, good. That's why Baskin & Robbins makes 131 flavors. So I'm walking in and I'm being very polite, and I'm in sales, and I'm shaking hands, introducing myself. I'm a new volunteer. And I go up to a woman who's one of the aides. The greatest people on earth are the aides in the hospitals and the nursing homes. And she's about this tall, this round, and I put out my hand and she says, she's from the South, honey, we hug here. And she wrapped her warm, wide arms around me, and I could smell the powder on her as my head just fit against her neck, and I could feel the sacredness in this place. I was on sacred ground in this place. I could feel it through my body. I had this instant awareness, and I just relaxed. That's what each of you does to family members and patients. You bring the awareness that they are on sacred ground, and you bring this calmness and peacefulness by just being there. And this woman, Linda, did it for me. And I became very dedicated. I was there for 6 years, 19 beds, full all the time. I can't count hundreds of men and women I watched living the end of their lives. I stood in the kitchen holding mothers crying, not understanding what was happening to their young kids. It was an amazing school, just amazing. And I saw 2 very distinct experiences, clearly. There were patients who were suffering, and they had more physical symptoms than another group. They had more family emotional issues going on. I saw parents throwing partners out of rooms. I saw partners arguing with friends. I saw all kinds of really aggressive stress in action over the suffering of people dying. That's what it is. And then I saw this other group of patients, and they were having parties in their rooms. Going, oh, this is cool. People were bringing food and decorating. I mean, the holidays. It was just amazing how some of these rooms would be so like home and so comfortable. Because this was the kind of sickness where people were in and out of the hospital or back and forth, and sometimes for long stays. You know, this was in the 90s when people could stay in the hospital for long stays. And they were living their lives. They were living. And sometimes we let people sneak pets in so if they were small enough. And what I noticed about the group that was living versus the group that was trying not to die was that the living group had accepted the fact that they were indeed dying, but they saw it as living the end of their lives, and they very often went into hospice. Hospice, I said to myself. There's something about this hospice stuff. What is it? And there would be some hospice discussions, but it was still nuts. People kept fighting. You know, and you all understand, I would fight. If I got a disease, I'd fight it. But eventually, I would say, I think I've fought enough. This isn't quitting. This isn't giving up. This is letting go. I want to live my life differently now. But most of these patients weren't ready. But the ones who were really experiencing life. They were living things. And so I said, I want to know more about this hospice stuff. This is fabulous. I was really encouraged that there was an organization, a system of care. I started reading, right? Cicely Saunders, 1967, England. She started the first hospice. And her medicine cart was a little tray with cigarettes and whiskey and scotch and candy. I think we could put that in the regs, maybe. Can we get those in the regs? I was like, yeah. That's how the first hospice was about hospitality. It was about caring for travelers on their journey, which we all are, when they got sick and couldn't travel any further. That's what hospice was. It gave them gave people a place to be at the end, and a place in which they created sacred ground, created sacred space for this. I think we get 3 miracles in life. We get a miracle at conception. The fact that two people from any get together, even find each other, and create a life is pretty amazing. And birth. Oh my God, birth. What an amazing miracle. I don't have any kids, but I share that with a lot of friends and younger friends now. And it's amazing, and all the choices we have for birth now. I mean, anybody here heard about water birth? I mean, think about birth today. When I was born, and many of you, I bet how many of you were even born at home before it was cool? Anybody here born at home? No? Yeah? You were. You're right. How old, may I ask you how old you were?
90.
Oh, no, you have to say that yourself.
90.
You're 90. And are you a hospice volunteer?
20 years retired.
Oh my God. Thank you. See, this is the society that you are a part of. 90. I forgot what you were born at home. Yeah, well, it became very unpopular for a while to give birth at home with midwives. With a midwife, they rolled their sleeves up. They stayed all night. The doctors don't want to stay anymore. But my dad was down the hall smoking cigarettes when I was born, and now, not only are the husbands there, but the grandparents are there, and somebody's there taking a videotape, and their older kids are there. And women now, they're scheduling C-sections around their business schedule sometimes because some women have jobs that they can't take time off of. And it's true. Some schedule it because it's otherwise convenient, but it is C-sections used to be emergency procedures. And midwives, there's a whole new birth in midwives as a profession, and doulas and water births. That's for real. I've seen a movie about water births. So at birth, we prepare for birth in ways we've never prepared for birth before, but we're not preparing for death. And it's up to you and me to change that, because we are not only ambassadors for hospice, we have got to become ambassadors for supporting the end of life, not denying it. And it starts earlier. It starts like now. That's what we have to do. So in this AIDS one, so I get to hospice and I get trained, and just at the same time I retire from my job, and my mother falls apart. Figures, I'm retired, I'm going to play golf. I'm going to learn to play golf, which I hated, by the way. I did learn, not my cup of tea, a little too intense there. And my mother falls apart. She's been a widow now for 7 years, and the house that she's lived in for 54 years and treated like her lover has gotten overwhelming, and she won't let us hire anyone to take care of the house to do anything. She tries to fix the cement cracks in the front steps and take the back door instead of getting it really repaired. So that became dangerous, and she still fell apart, wound up in the emergency room, and then in the hospital for 3 months on the psych ward. That was a transforming experience. Very transforming. And then she moved to a cute little independent living facility. I gotta understand, my mother and I had a really tough relationship, so this was not an easy time in my life, because when my dad died, it was really the beginning of the end of her life. She became involuntarily dependent on her children to fulfill all the roles that my father had played in her life for 61 years. She didn't like that. And frankly, neither did we. But that's what happened. And it happens to everybody. How long it goes on varies, but it happens. So we sold the house and emptied all the contents, and one day I went to visit her, and she was sitting very unhappy on the sofa in this cute apartment I had decorated. You would have loved it. It was just so adorable. And she's sitting there frowning, and I go, "Mom, what's the matter?" And she says, "You never see any people here." And I put my hand on my hip, and I looked out the window with a view, just 10th floor, overlooking Lakeshore Drive, Lake Michigan, park, trees. And I looked at her and said, "Mother, for 54 years your view was the back of the garage." But it was the back of her garage. The lake, the park, the high rise, that was my view.
She was not happy. I was, and I didn't realize that. And that was part of the transformation that I had to go through, that being with dying has helped me do. The next trip to the emergency room my mother made, she came home wearing diapers for the first time in her life. And I slept on the sofa across from her and watched her all night long in bed. She acted like she was sleeping, but I don't think she was. It was her 88th birthday, and she stopped walking. She couldn't get up from the chair after the party. It was like her warranty ran out. And of course, that meant she had to go back to the hospital for a little readjustment, and then she moved to a nursing home, where the most amazing transformation of my experience as a hospice volunteer occurred. I would never have predicted this. I mean, my mom going to the nursing home, that day was one of the worst days of our lives. Anybody have a parent that's been forced to move to a nursing home? What was that like for you?
It was awful. I can't even discuss it now without, I can't talk about it. I think it's the worst thing, the hardest thing in life is getting so incapacitated that you have to go to a nursing home because your family can't do it. Or you don't want your family.
Thank you, Isabel. Did everybody hear that? Yeah, it's so incapacitated that your family can't take care of you anymore, and then you felt bad that you couldn't take care of her. Was this your mother?
Yeah, I would take care of her, but she doesn't want to.
And she
She's
didn't.
happier. She's happier.
She didn't want. She didn't want to be a burden to you.
No, she as she got older, she didn't like her daughters because they weren't her husband.
Okay, stay tuned for the rest of this. Yeah. And you?
Yes, I had to place my dad in a nursing home right from the hospital, and I couldn't tell him. I just couldn't do it, so I had the doctor do it. But I lied to him, see, and that made it worse. As I told him he was just going to be there for a little while, that I would go ahead and pay his rent for the next 3 months or whatever, till you're well enough to go back to your apartment. So every month he gave me his money, and I paid his rent. And I knew he would never go back, you know, but God has his way of working things out.
That was pretty loving, I think, to pay his rent for to hold that space for him.
Knowing he would never go back, and it was hard, because he'd say, do you have my receipt? You know, they don't trust anybody, not even they lose their trust.
Well, they know you. You know, you can't be surprised our parents don't trust us. Anybody ever lied to your parent and they caught you? Yeah. Was there someone else who had to move a loved one to a nursing home? Yeah. These are very, I think, telling comments, and there's something we share.
Well, I guess I was kind of lucky because I had some time to, a couple of weeks to go and visit different places when it had to happen. It was the best thing for her, and had to arrange the best thing for her, which also meant me being her primary caregiver but still working had to be good for me too. And I found a fabulous place. It was 5 minutes from work. I could be there at lunch. I could be there after work. My father became ill. I could get him on the Medicare part of the wing. I could take him to see her and her to see him. And I guess I'm just kind of weird. We decorated her space with brought her paintings that she painted herself, and I don't know, I guess maybe I'm a little weird, but it was, don't get me wrong, it's not that I love my mother immensely. I mean, did everything I possibly could for her, and felt I never could do enough, but I don't know, like I said, I answer for myself, I guess I'm just a little weird.
Now, I think that what is not, and I think we have to be very careful of, you know, judging other people for anything, because people have their stories and they have their past experiences that make us do things. Like my decision not to go visit my husband when he was dying, my ex-husband, there was a lot in it. And I could have just, I had enough money, I could have said, oh yeah, I'm going right there, but there were a lot of things to consider. And the same thing with my mother in the nursing home. We just couldn't take care of her, and she wouldn't have allowed anyone in her home. There were a lot of reasons, and some people react differently. I do know a number of people that like being in the nursing home because they find it social, and they like the fact that they get breakfast in bed, and that they get their laundry done, and the room is clean for them, and they are surrounded by people like themselves. So there are all kinds of different experiences, but for us it was really hard because my goal was to make my mother happy, and I couldn't seem to make her happy. And I had the kind of mother that if I wanted to feel bad about myself, all I had to do was call her up, go visit her, be anywhere near her, and sometimes even talking about her made me feel pretty crappy. It was one of those relationships, what can I say? You get the parents you get. And when she went to the nursing home, she didn't speak to me for 3 months. So, and I was retired, so what did I do? I went every day. Well, I went 5 days a week and let my sister do it on the weekends. Because my sister didn't feel the same way I did. My sister said, man, it was to my sister, caring for my mother was an obligation. But to me, it was a mission. And so I was there all the time, and this nice nursing home, and it was a pretty nice one, and they're now all, how many of you are in nursing homes as part of your volunteer work? Yeah, there's a range of nursing home quality and experiences, I know that. But so my mom, so I had nothing to, I was there and I'd go for dinner time. So what did I do? I made friends with all the other residents. The ladies she sat with at her table and their family, their daughters, a lot of daughters, a few sons, but mostly daughters. So I started making friends with all these people because I was there and my mother wasn't talking to me. So what else was I going to do? And pretty soon what happened? They started these residents, and I'm a trained hospice volunteer, and I'm thinking, oh great, I have a whole group of patients coming up here, and that it sort of started to happen. And I've been doing some home visits also, which was very different. Home visits were really amazingly different, mostly because I did get cookies and tea when I did home visits, so they were very appreciative. And so this was 2000. And I was with a very small kind of loose hospice, and I could do manicures, which I can't do now because I'm not licensed, and do a little bit more things. So the home visits were kind of fun. I like that. And then all of a sudden here I am in the nursing home, and the patients are in double rooms, the residents are in double rooms, so I didn't have the kind of privacy you have in a home visiting. Those of you who do nursing homes in these double rooms. And I thought, well, this is kind of challenging. And then my mom turned 90 one day, and I'm having hospice patients there, and this is something's happening to me. I'm feeling myself changing in this time in the nursing home as often as I'm there. And it was interesting to me. I could feel things that were important to me were no longer important to me. And stuff, I used to really care about stuff. Now I like stuff. You can tell I like stuff. But I used to like stuff a real lot, and shop a lot, and have a lot, and want more, and like the people who had a lot, and being with people who were dying, and being in the nursing home stopped making that stuff matter. And you're saying, yes, you notice that. I wasn't arguing about things that used to make me want to argue. And when I had a customer service problem, like with AT&T, I wasn't nasty anymore. I admit it. I could have been nasty. So this whole transformation was going on with me just because I was hanging out with people who were dying and the people who loved them. So when my mom's buddy from the dinner table started to die, Marcy, I was around a lot. And Marcy had 2 daughters that used to come after work frequently, and we hung out, and sometimes we go out after. And I really liked them a lot. And Marcy started to die, and I was there one night because I was vigiling with my mother, and I said I would call them if anything happened. And sure enough, I kept going back and forth, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, Marcy's breath started going really slow. And I called the girls and they came over. And the three of us are sitting there. One is up against the wall in a chair, trying to hold her mother's hand. And she couldn't turn the chair around because there wasn't enough room. And the other one was on the other side of the bed with the oxygen tank and the curtain between the other bed. And she's trying to get a grip on her mom. And I'm sitting at the foot of the bed with my knees against the bed because there isn't really a lot of room in the room. And we're laughing and telling stories, and they're holding their mother's hands. And we're having a really good time. And all of a sudden, it's quiet. Now, Marcy's roommate had 3 roommates die already. And this woman didn't want to get out of bed to go to the bathroom. So we were starting to worry about her because she hadn't moved. And it's all of a sudden, nothing's happening. And Chris looks at her mother and says, "Mom?" And her daughter looks at her and says, "Huh?" And I look at them, and she's gone. It was so peaceful and so quiet. We could have missed it. It was the first time I'd had anybody, die. This is really amazing. And we started going around. She's very popular, so we started going around to the rooms and telling everybody, and telling the nurses that Marcy had died, that they wanted to come and see her. So her favorite aide came. We got him, and he cleaned her up and kind of dressed her up, and we made this really pretty. And I had flowers in my mother's room, so I went down the hall and got the flowers, and I peeled the petals, and I put them in a box. And as every resident and staff person came in, we offered them the box and said, "This is your last gift of friendship to offer to Marcy." And they would put some petals on her bed. So by the time this little wake had gone over, she was covered in multicolored flower petals. And her daughters remember, we all remember this vision of seeing her. And then the funeral director came and wrapped her up and carted her away. And the next day he called her oldest daughter and said, "Should your mother have something about bees?" And Chris said, "Well, only that when she lived in California for a while, she had a window over her sink, and she said a bee used to come and visit all the time. In fact, it would let her pet it sometimes. Why are you asking me?" And the funeral director said, "Because when I unrolled the blankets, a swarm of bees came out." Now, I pulled those petals off. There weren't any bees in them. And that was, I thought, ooh, this death thing is really mysterious. Have any of you had things like that happen? You're going, yes, yes, yes? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting to say that because when my great-grandmother died, and I hadn't even known she had died yet. She lived in Atlanta. And right before she had died, I had a vision of her standing in my room, and I was, there by myself. So then I get a phone call about half an hour later that she had died, and I didn't, know that. So.
Anyone else? It's mysterious. I don't say, oh, I just say, okay. I mean, you had some things?
I have,
Lots?
yeah, that's what I mean. I don't even want to get started. I do just so many.
I had a patient, a young man, who was sitting upright because he just couldn't breathe, and he hadn't closed his eyes for a couple days, I think. Maybe because he was afraid, maybe because they were dry, that happens. But I was sitting in the room alone with him, and I was reading a book, and I looked up, and he was looking around the room, empty room, as though it were full of faces, people. He was just going from here to there, and suddenly he looked and stopped and smiled, and he died 2 hours later. Yeah. Have any of you read the book Callahan and Final Gifts? They talk a lot about all of this. I will add that to the list of things that I'm going to have John send you. Final Gifts. A lot of experiential stories. So I'm visiting at the nursing home, and I get another patient over there who is 42 years old, and she has 5 children under the age of 20. And their father had died the year before of a heart attack, and the youngest one, a 12-year-old, had found him. Now, the hospice staff is taking really good care of this woman. She has lung cancer, and she has tumors growing out of her neck, huge tumors, and she's in a lot of pain. And they move her to the nursing home, and she's in a double room, and my job as the volunteer, which I offered to do, was to bring her kids after school to visit her. They'd been taking care of her and they couldn't anymore and they had to move her, so we bring her after. I brought them after school. The 3 littler ones, the 2 older ones could get themselves there. And they do some homework, and one day they were playing with one of them was riding around in the electric wheelchair, and that put to an end pretty fast. But it was this living time that I had seen before, you know, helping someone live through this experience. And when Ethel started to really get quiet, her sister and I were kind of taking turns staying with her, and I went to spell her sister, and was sitting there, and I was reading a book about death and dying, and I was just sitting next to her, and I'd occasionally stop and read some of her favorite Bible entries. And then I thought, you know, she likes music, so I put a DVD on the player, and as I put the DVD on the player, a wind came through the window and blew all the papers on the tray table at the end of her bed onto the floor. Now, her window was open all the time. She liked it cool in there. And I'd been there a lot. I'd never seen a wind come in before. And this wind was noisy. It went, shh. Papers went down. I turned on the DVD as that happened. And when I bent down to pick up the papers and sat up, Ethel was looking at a picture of her family on the wall, a huge poster of a picture I'd taken. I take a lot of pictures for my hospice patients. And the song changed to She's Going Up Yonder, and she passed away. She just died, she left. It was, and I mean, I am so blessed to be here, because I would have felt bad if I hadn't, if I'd walked out. I'm so blessed to be here, and this is so amazing, but oh my gosh, I'm supposed to pick her kids up in an hour and bring them over here. So start scrambling on the phone, and her sister brought the key. Well, this is all going on, the family's getting organized, and I knew she was being cremated, and this was the last time her family would see her. I got the social worker from the hospice came over, and we cleared out all the equipment in the room, and we smoothed out the bed and made it very pretty. And she also had, her sister always kept flowers in the room. And I covered up the light so it would be soft. And the aides started to come in, and they weren't used to seeing, mostly the aides in the nursing homes don't get to say goodbye to the residents. They are on duty, and the resident is wrapped up and removed very quickly. In fact, the state law in Illinois wants 4 hours max, and they let them out in 2, if not sooner. So I thought, you know, these kids need to be here. They need to say goodbye to her. They need to see her again. So we made the room really peaceful, and it really did feel sacred. And they started coming in one by one. One of the aides thought we put makeup on her because she was peaceful. 42 years old, not the right time to be dying. You know, we'd all rather have 99, but this is what it was. And we brought them in, and we did the flower petal ceremony, and I had them all hold hands and circle around her bed, and somewhere out of, I don't know where, a prayer came out of me, and this moment of time with this family who were able to connect hand to hand was so important to them, because that was the last time they'll ever be able to do that. And she was gone. And it was a moment that I felt, for some reason, like all of you will find moments like this that you're in them because you've been called to be there. And there's something within you that comes out like it did with me. You know, we can't be who we are if we're not in places to be who we are. And sometimes we can create those places, but when in this situation, when you're with someone who's dying or who has died, you have an amazing gift because you're there. Just that. And an amazing ability to transform the suffering around you in such small ways. It takes so little to make a really big difference at that time. And I realized that in these places where people die, we need to be creating sacred space. We need to acknowledge the fact that this is a miracle going on in front of our eyes, and this is a hard time. You know, so I'm trying to prepare for my mom's death because I know what's going to happen. And she had one morning around then not woke up. It was just, they couldn't get her out of bed, and they called the hospital and sent her to the emergency room. And the next thing I know, there I am, and 2 days later, there's a doctor standing in front of me saying, "Your mother's not eating, she needs a feeding tube." Oh my God, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. So I kind of didn't deal with it. And then I realized I have to deal with this, and I said, let's call hospice. We'll take her back to the nursing home and hospice. And a few days later, she woke up and said, "Where's my lunch?" Okay, hospice patient for 2 months. She got so much better, they discharged her. How many of you have had patients discharged? Isn't that great? Oh my God. And so somebody said, call it graduation once. Oh, it's graduation. I think maybe this is graduation is the bottom. So this is going on, and we're getting along really well, me and my mother. And I start raising butterflies in the nursing home. And I don't know, there's monarch butterflies. I've always collected butterflies. My friends give me, you come into my house and you're like, this, there's so many butterflies around. But they are such a perfect symbol of transformation. You know the story, you get an egg, a butterfly lays an egg, and the egg hatches and eats its host plant, and it becomes a caterpillar, and then the caterpillar, one day, stops eating. It stops eating, and it walks around looking for a place to hang so it can transform. And in the monarch butterfly, they hang upside down in the shape of a J for a day and a half, and something in their biology tells them when, and their skin splits over their head, and it rolls up the body, and inside the chrysalis swells up so the skin keeps moving up, and it spins on the little peg it's formed with its hind legs until the skin falls off. It stops moving, and the chrysalis shrinks into this beautiful jade green oval with a little gold bar on it. It's an amazing thing. And within this chrysalis, in 2 weeks, a butterfly forms. And this chrysalis looks like a period where nothing is happening. It's just hanging there still. But the most miraculous transformation is going on inside. Because one day, in an instant, just like it decided to transform from a caterpillar to a chrysalis, the skin splits, the chrysalis opens, and this butterfly emerges with this big chubby body and little wrinkled wings, and it spends about a minute pumping fluid into its wings and watch them unfold. And I release them, and I think, what does that first flight feel like? It's been in this little bitty shell for 2 weeks. Half of its life has been spent in the shell, and now it's free. I just love to watch that happen. Because I think that's what happens at death. I don't know where I go after. I don't know where you're going after. You may know. But I don't know. I'm not sure what that's all about, that after stuff. But I do know this animation that makes me, is going to leave my body one day. I've watched it happen. Suddenly, ooh, nobody home. Gone, dead. And I think there's something about that flight of the butterfly that is so indicative of what happens to us. So I start raising butterflies at the nursing home so they can watch this with me. And my mom starts to transform. On her 90th birthday, I say, "Mom, what's it like to be 90? She didn't stop to think. She said, "It went so fast." And I thought, well, that's a good answer. Would you do anything differently? And she also didn't stop to think. She said, "I'd be a better mother." And my first response was, she knew. Of course she knew. Mothers are guilty. They talk about it all the time. Anybody a mother here? What's the first thing, right? Anybody ever say, "I feel so guilty, I did"? Yeah, right. Can't win. Dads? Yeah, same thing. Parents, hard stuff. A lot of guilt in that. But she admitted it, and somehow I actually could feel something in me break open. I was sitting on her bed, she was in a wheelchair, and I thought, oh my, that's interesting enough. And I saw her as a woman struggling just like I am, trying to be happy, trying to be peaceful, trying to live my life, be who I am, and I forgave her. I said, Mom, you were the best mother I could have ever had. You taught me what I needed to learn. And she continued to teach me. And she taught me through her death. And I want to show you a 4-minute slideshow of photographs I took in my mother's last 8 days of life and the hours after her death in a Chrysalis Room. This nursing home decided to make a commitment to make a private room just for hospice patients at the end of life. Families can spend the night. There's a table and chairs. It's a big room. It's beautifully decorated. They've got a little refrigerator. They bring food in from the dining room. And all the residents are invited to visit their friend who is in the Chrysalis Room. And all the staff are invited to visit their friend. So nobody is dying alone. And everyone is dying supported. They're in hospice care, so they're appropriately medicated. This is an experience that is amazing. And the Pioneer Coalition, which is a nationwide network whose mission is to change the culture of nursing homes, has adopted this concept and is encouraging nursing homes to use them. And I'm sure those of you who work in nursing homes will agree that this would be a wonderful experience. But something that people at home, this I think is the essence of what hospice care is about people being there. And I'm not going to talk to this, but the first photograph is my mother on her 92nd birthday with her hospice chaplain. She was a patient 3 times before she finally died. She liked hospice. And the second picture, the third picture was taken by a photographer friend of mine in February. That was her birthday was September, then February. And the third picture was after she had a stroke that ultimately did take her life. And then you'll see the way we and the people who came to visit her cared for her. And then when she dies, you'll see her after her death. She's on a blue butterfly pillow that I'd given to Marcy for her birthday, and her daughters gave it back to us, on condition that when my mother died, we give it back to them. And her hospice aide came and bathed my mother like she was a queen. And then we held a little wake in her room. So you'll see this. So I'd like you to meet my mom, Anna Schenck, and keep vigil with me as I kept vigil with her.
Sound. And you need the beginning. You started.
We are not 30 years old. We have small tech issues here. Anybody here have tech issues? Oh, come on, admit it. Oh, my God, I drowned my old phone. I had to get it and decided to get a fancy, really. Okay, so back to Anna.
We had sound.
Ron, can you turn that up a little bit? That's about it. That's
other than just flipping stations, and I saw 8 dead bodies just going through channels, advertising shows or on shows. We see violent death and dead bodies all the time, but we don't see natural death. We don't see this biological process that is natural. And consequently, most families don't understand that you know, we have a biological process of dying. And the body does things like the caterpillar stops eating. People stop eating before they die. It's part of the way we process our life. And we're not doing that. And, all the kind of aggressive medical treatment that we're all eligible for. We have to think about this. And as hospice advocates and ambassadors, I think it's important that while we're maintaining the HIPAA policies, to talk about these things, about what happened, what people living the end of their lives are allowed to do. And right now, you know this, 35% of all hospice patients are in the care of hospice for 7 or fewer days. How often, I'm sure there's somebody you get a notice that you have a new patient and they die before you get to see them. How many of you have had that happen? Yeah, it's so sad. And the median stay is 21 days. It's so sad. And it's free. You know, there are 4 things about hospice care that most people don't know. I mean, what are the things people know about hospice? Why do you think people don't want to go into hospice? What do you think? What do you think? Why? Anybody have a?
It's death.
It's death. 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 Don't want to deal with death, right?
They think it's giving up.
It's giving up. That's giving up is a really big thing. And I'm so glad, I did not ask her to say that, but you're leading into the next thing I'm trying. I've learned a lot in this school, and I did go to school. I find death really interesting, and I'm going to die one day. I do believe that. But before I die, a lot of people I love are going to die. And some of the things that I've learned from being with dying is, one, acceptance is really important. And it's not just, I think this is life practice. In fact, I call them 7 practices for making peaceful transitions through life and death. And the first one is acceptance. Now, the Thanksgiving after my mother died, I sat at the table with 12 of my family, and there was my 22-year-old godson on his way to Iraq with the Marines, and my 93-year-old Aunt Vera, who's my mother's last remaining of 5 siblings. And I looked around the table. These are my nearest and dearest, and I looked around the table, and my cousin, the head of the house, is saying the grace, and he says, in this house, grace is the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And suddenly I realized that one of these people at this table will be the first to die, and one will be the last. I cannot change that. And then I realized I could be either. We were all worried about Sean on his way to Iraq, and he just came back from Afghanistan last week for his 2nd tour. And then Aunt Vera, who did die 2 years later, but I could be either. And I want to be prepared, and I want my loved ones to be prepared. As hospice volunteers, it's one thing we're caring for the patients, but the families, you see the families. And by the time we get to those families, they have been through all the things I described I went through with my father and my mother. I've also learned it's important to let go, and it's not giving up, because we do the best we can. We do the very best we can. We don't get practice. We don't really get to practice whether or not we are going to have a parent in a nursing home. That happens. You make the decision that's the best decision at the time you make it, and you have to let go of feeling that you made a wrong decision. It's done. You know, Franklin Covey, brilliant, Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits for Effective People. He has a time management class, and he says, draw a line on a piece of paper. Think about it. If you don't have a piece of paper, think about this. Draw a line on a piece of paper and put notches on each end. Okay? Your birth is on one end, your death is on the other. Draw a line where you are today. Think about that. Everything that's happened in your life is done. You cannot change it. Serenity to accept the things you can't change. Courage to change the things you can. Everything on the other side of that line that comes to you now, use what you've learned to change. Don't make the same mistake twice. Or 3 times for sure. Sometimes it takes twice. You can't change the past. Let go of the feelings that are stopping you from living your life fully and loving yourselves. You gotta love yourself. I depended on my mother to make me love myself. That was silly. Because happiness is an inside job. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I have, it's not productive to hold on to guilt about something you can't change and regret, because it's not good. Something else I've learned from my hospice patients. Some people like to die alone. They want to die alone. My dad could have died before I went home. He knew I was going to work. The sun was up. I had to go to work. He didn't want me there. All that terrible, I spent years feeling bad, and thousands of dollars in therapy, feeling bad that I wasn't there with my family. Tuesdays with Maury, that famous for books, his family, he was dying for a long time. His family was keeping vigil, and they all went in the kitchen for coffee. Maury went to heaven, or wherever he was. Some people are going to die alone. We cannot go through our lives feeling bad we missed it. If they want us there, we'll be there. Right? You hear people, oh, he waited for Joe to come in from Tokyo. Well, if he could wait for Joe to come into Tokyo, he could leave when he wanted to. That's what I think. We have to practice letting go now. You got to let go of the clothes in your closet you don't wear anymore. You got to let go of those boxes in the basement that have been packed up for 10 years. I'm serious. You have to practice letting go now. You have to let go of people that aren't good to you. You got to let go of it. Life's too short. At 90, my mother said, life's too short. Let go of what doesn't bring you alive. Let it go. Practice, because one day you are going to be laying where your patients are laying, and you're going to have to let go of you. And you're going to have to let go of all the people you love. That patient is doing an awful lot of work there, even in silence and quiet. The family is saying goodbye to one person. That patient, that person dying, is saying goodbye to everyone. That's hard work. That's why it takes so long sometimes. It's hard work. They have to say goodbye to everybody and everything they love, everything they know. And then there's always that little bit of, oh gosh, what's happening after this? It's a lot of work. You have to practice now. Practice letting go. It's not giving up. There's a freedom in letting go. Giving up. If I get, let's see. Okay. Try to get that. Try. Whoops. Hey! See, things happen like that too. That's like, I'm holding on. But when I let go, it's easy. I don't want that pen. I don't want those dresses. I don't need those dishes. I don't need that. The garage. Hey, come on. Garages. Let go. Practice now. There's something else I learned. I don't want to wait until I have to say goodbye to somebody to say these things. And I'm going to show you. I do this all the time with people I love. Once is often enough, but the moment comes up, just like it's coming up now. And I'm going to say to you, Gloria, you have been in my life a really long time. And I was so lucky that we ever met. And you have done wonderful things for me just by being my friend. And I want you to know that if there's anything I have ever done that I should be forgiven for, I'm going to ask you to forgive me. And if there's anything you think that you've done to me, honey, you're forgiven. I love you, and I thank you for everything. We have to be doing that. We can't wait till somebody's gone and you walk out the door and you haven't said that to your
mother, your father, your son, your daughter, you know? And if you really don't like them, then don't say it. But the people you love can't let you go without those words out. It took me 15 years to get over my dad because I had to say those things to him. I'm not letting that happen with any of my good friends. My sister can aggravate me, believe you me. I thought when my mom died, my sister and I would have nothing more to talk about. We're closer than ever. Because I did my advanced directives with her. Yeah, have any of you done advanced healthcare directives? You know, I'm recommending you really start thinking about that because I wouldn't be in a body today anymore without advanced directives than I would drive a car without them. Because if you go to a hospital and you can't speak for yourself, the hospital wants to see the person with papers. They will get your family will get no information, and you know, if the situation were so desperate that you were facing life support, which many of us will before we die. I mean, that's like automatic procedure now. You go in an emergency and you're on life support. Someone you love, someone who loves you is going to be asked to stop treatment. And you need to be telling them what to do. Because there is no position in life worse than standing next to someone you love and the doctor saying, if we don't do this and this and this, they will die. And you're being asked to say, don't do it. And allowing death. I mean, these people don't even have, they'll never get to hospice. We're talking, you need to be doing this. And I'm going to recommend, this is my favorite form. It's called the 5 Wishes. And I'll send the information to John where you can get this. It's a healthcare power of attorney and a living will. And you sit down, you do this yourself, and then you sit down with your loved ones and you go through it with them. And you'll cry. Get a bottle of wine, get some beer, order a pizza, and do your 5 wishes. And you will get closer to your loved ones.
I just want to say, Hospice of Michigan has a wonderful tool on our website, and it's called, that's okay, it's pretty much similar to the 5 wishes, but it's called Have You Had the Talk? And it gives a lot of information on how to talk to your loved ones and also the advanced directives. So just a little plug for our program as well.
Better yet, right here in your own hometown. In your own hometown. So, advanced directives, and talk about them. We have National Healthcare Decisions Day now, and you know, you change your mind. I have just had the most wonderful thing happen to me. I fell in love. I'm in love. I'm in love. It's been a long time. That's why sometimes second, third times around are good. I'm in love. And this is going to change everything. He's in love too. It's going to change everything. It will certainly, in fact, I asked him who his power of attorney was, and he said, well, yeah, I got to change that. Yeah. But it is going to change everything. And we're both 63. And I've already had, he thinks what I'm doing is important and he wants to help me, which is good because I cannot be involved with a man who wouldn't want me to talk about death and dying. It's just not going to work in my life. I have friends who won't invite me to dinner anymore. Did you do that 5 wishes I gave you? But what can I say? It's important, and somebody's got to do it. And we're on the inside. We know things. So we were talking, and I said, you know, at this stage in life, one of us we're going to get sick. And it could happen sooner than we want it to. And who knows what it's going to be. You know, my 77-year-old cousin is in stage 2.5 Alzheimer's right now. It's terrifying to me to watch. I've had a lot of hospice patients at end-stage dementia, but this is the first time I've known someone before they. How many of you have a loved one with dementia, Alzheimer's? It is so hard. It's just so hard. And, you know, there's another situation where advanced directives are really important. Have these conversations. We need to be getting familiar with death through life. It is a part of life. It's that, you know, it's like if our life is a puzzle, it's a piece in the puzzle. It's got to fit in there. And working with it is part of it. So, you know, I don't know how much time we're going to have in this relationship before something goes haywire, but I really believe these practices of acceptance and letting go of things and being prepared and understanding what hospice does for people and sharing the journey with our loved ones and being in touch and staying close and connected all the time and letting go of getting rid of things and people and beliefs that don't serve us are really important. And we have to heal our grief, and not with martinis, but to cry and talk about it. And you know, hospice volunteers, you grieve your patients' deaths. You need to allow yourselves the time and place to do that, and getting together in meetings is a really important way to do that. Because they're losses. And we have to honor our losses and respect those losses and how they transform us, because, you know, life is full of suffering. And our goal as humans is to transform that suffering into peace. And you all do that for your patients and their families. Now, there are a lot of things I don't know. And the other practice is gratitude. You've got to have gratitude. Thankfulness is the best medicine there is. And I think doing all those things through our lives really helps us at the end of our lives and at the end of our loved ones' lives. As well, you know, I don't know when I'm going to die. I don't know how I'm going to die. I don't know where I'm going to die. I mean, every year I pass the anniversary of my death. It could be April 28th. I do. Won't matter to me, but it will to my loved ones. But I don't know any of those things. But I do know that part of my work as a living human being is to help myself grow through my life so that when I get to the end of it, I can be peaceful and I can be ready. And I also know that I want to be cared for by a hospice. I want all those wonderful team members to be coming into my house, I hope, maybe a nursing home, I don't know. I may be in a nursing home. I don't know. I can't control what happens, all of it. But I do want to be cared for by hospice because I know that if I'm cared for by hospice, I will have a hospice volunteer like one of you, sitting at my bedside, transforming my suffering just by being here. And thank you for being here today. I have a PS, I almost forgot. 2 years ago, on January 10th, before Valentine's Day, I was going through a World Market store, and I was on my way to a month-long spiritual retreat, a silent retreat. I do that periodically, but never for a month. And I'm running through the store, and I noticed 2 spinner racks full of Valentine's cards. It's January, they were very full. And I stopped and I thought, oh, do I need to send any Valentines to the little girls in my life? That's another thing, make younger friends. Gotta do that. And I said no, and I kept passing this display, and it wouldn't get away from me. So finally, I just walked up to it, and a card on the front of the display just called out to me, and I reached out and grabbed it. And it was this card. There's not a word on the front of this card. There were 60 cards in this display. It's a tall girl with dark hair that I used to wear like this, by the way, with red shoes and a red dress, and I wear a lot of red. And she has angel wings, and I just grabbed this card. And when I opened it up, it says, "Daughter, your love is such a gift. Happy Valentine's Day." It's very mysterious. It's very mysterious. Open to the mystery. Be good to yourselves. Take care of yourselves. And keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.